Okay, today's daf is Masechta Menachos Daf Yud Daled, number 14. And we're going to start from Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis by the Mishnah, straight up. So let us just look at a picture. Here's a picture. Here's a picture of here we go. Here's a picture of a carbon mincha that you had, not a carbon that you had on Shavuos. They would bring two sheeps, and then they would have what's called the shtei halachem, the two breads. And after they makriv the two sheeps, then the two breads become mutter to the kahanim. Okay, and why did they bring this special carbon on Shavuos? Because that allowed the new crop to be brought into the Beis Hamikdash. You know, Chodesh would wait till the day after Pesach, but for the Beis Hamikdash, in order for them to bring the new Tvua, they had to wait till after Shavuos, till they brought the Shtei Alechem. Now, notice they have two sheeps. Each one of these sheeps, you need to be makriv both sheeps in order to eat the two breads, in order for the Kohanim to eat the two breads. So each of the sheep is like a half a matir, because both sheeps are matir the breads, and each sheep is a half of a matir. And then the Kohanim can eat the bread. So that is the introduction, very straightforward. Now we're going to have an interesting machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim. Shachat shnei chavasim le'echol achas min achalas lemochar. Rabbi Yossi says, what happens if you shech both sheeps? Okay, but you have a carbon pigel thought to eat one of the breads tomorrow. So if we look at the picture, he shechted both sheeps, and each time he had a mind that challah number A we're going to eat tomorrow, which is a pigel thought, because that's chutz lizmanoi. The question is, does challah number B become pigel as well? Remember, if you eat pigel, you get kares. So, or we have the same thing by hikter shnei bezichan. You're supposed to makriv two ladles of menachos, of levina, in order to eat the showbreads on every Shabbos. So here is the showbreads, and the two ladles is over here, and you makriv both ladles, but with the intention to eat one of the all the showbreads of one group tomorrow, which is supposed to be eaten on Shabbos. You said you're going to have a mind to eat it on Sunday, the kohen. So does the other group of showbreads become pigel as well? Rabbi Yossi says, Oisa chala v'oisa haseda shechisha v'ala pigel v'chayavin ala koris. That chala and that group of lechem aponim that you had the bad thought on, that's pigel and you chayav koris. Basheni, but the other group or the other chala is pasul ve'in by koris. It's not pigel, it's pasul. You can't eat it, but you don't get koris. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Chachamim says pigel. Chachamim say they both are pigel. The chayavim aleh kares, and you get kares on eating both, even though you had in mind a pigel thought only on one of the chalas. So comes along Rabbi Huna, and Rabbi Huna is going to try to extend what Rabbi Yossi said, and we're going to slug up Rabbi Huna. Amar Rav Huna, Rav Suna said, Oima hoya Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said, Rabbi Yossi will extend what Rabbi Yossi said. Pigel b'yerach shel yamin loy nisparach har yerach shel smoi. Let's look at the picture. The picture says, here's a picture of a sheep. Comes along Rav Huna and says that Rabbi Yossi will hold that in one animal you could have pigel on one leg, because Rabbi Yossi says you don't say it spreads, right? So as we saw in the Mishnah. So Rabbi Yossi, so it comes along Rav Huna and said Rabbi Yossi will hold that if you have pigel on the right leg, the left leg is not pigel. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, according to Rav Huna. So my tama, what is the reason? Oh, hold on a second. Okay, hold on. We have people joining. Yeah. Okay. So Steve and Alan just joined us. So let's just briefly with Yud Gimel and Beis by the Mishnah, and we just did the Mishnah, but let us just repeat what the Mishnah said. Basically, here's the picture. You have a two sheeps that were brought on Shavuos to be mater the shtei halechem, the two loaves of bread which were eaten by the Kohanim. So they made this sheep and this sheep into a shlamim, and they allow the Kohanim to eat the two loaves of bread, the shtei halechem. And the purpose of the shtei halechem was to allow to bring karbonos from the new crop. So that was one of the important procedures in the Beis Hamikdash on Shavuos. Now, hold on. Yeah. So now the question is, according to the Mishnah says, each one, by the way, is called a half of a mat. You need to be makar of both in order to eat those showbreads. So the Mishnah said, what happens if a person had shechted both sheeps to eat, let's say, loaf number A, chutz lizmanai, right? So he had a pigel thought only on loaf A. Question is, does loaf B become pigel as well? So Rabbi Yossi says, no, pigel is limited to a loaf A, and therefore, if you eat loaf A, you get kares, but not if you eat loaf B. Chachamim says once loaf A is pigel, even if you didn't have a pigel thought by loaf B also becomes pigel. So it extends. So Rav Huna wanted to say on this case, so here's the picture again. Rav Huna wanted to say that according to Rabbi Yossi, here's an animal. Let's say I'm shechting this little sheep for a chatas, whatever it is, a chatas. And I have a pigel thought on the right leg. According to Rabbi Yossi, it's not going to extend to the left leg. That is going to be the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. That's what the Gemara is holding now. Amar Rav Huna, Oimer Rav Meir, pigel biyarach shal yamin, loy nispagel hayarach shal small. If you have a pigel thought on the right leg, and then the left leg is not going to be pigel. Says the Gemara, my tama. What's the reason? I can tell you it's logical, and I can tell you it's a pasuk. If you have a bunch of little pieces of meat, separate, right? So if one leg becomes tame, are you going to say it spreads to the other legs? They're different pieces. So if you have a pigel thought in one leg, it's not going to spread to the other leg. The Iba is saying if you want, there's a pasuk that says, if you eat mimenu, that's a kid, one piece, you get an avera pigel. Mimenu, you can eat one piece of the whole animal, and you get pigel, and you're not going to get pigel and isakaris from eating the other leg. So that is the big chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda in extending Rabbi Yossi. If you have a pigel thought in the right leg, it does not extend to the left leg. Esvei Rav Nachman Rav Huna. So Rav Nachman's going to ask. We're going to have three questions against Rav Huna, and then we're going to refute that. The Brisa says, "La'olam ein boy koris achish fagel b'shteiim bekazayis." The Brisa says, by shtei alechem, it's not going to have koris by eating the breads until you have a kazayis between both of them. Here, a different picture. The Brisa says that if you have here it is, the pink is a half a kazayas. If you have a half a kazayas of pigel thought on loaf A, and you have a half a kazayas on loaf B, then you mafagel both loaves. So that's what the Brisa says. It's mashma from this Brisa that if you just be mafagel loaf A, it will not extend to loaf B. So it must be the Brisa goes according to who? According to Rabbi Yossi. That's clear. That's what the Gemara is going to prove. And if the Brisa goes according to Rabbi Yossi, and he says you could combine loaf A and loaf B in your mind, you could combine them into one piece. If you have a half a zayis of loaf A and a half a zayis of loaf B, then according to Rabbi Yossi, by default, you should be able to combine. If you just makfagel the right leg, it's one body. It should extend to the left leg. So how could Rav Huna say? Oh, Rabbi Yossi would say if you mafagel one leg, it wouldn't extend to the left leg. That's what the Gemara is now going to say. It says the Brisa says, if you mafagel one of the loaves, the other loaf will not become pigel. Money. Who is the author of this Brisa? Ile Ramabanam. If you're going to say it's Rabbanam, that's not true. Afila ba'achas mehem nami. Rabbanan say that even if you mafagel loaf A, it automatically extends to loaf B. That's not without a question. So therefore, this Brisa is certainly not Rabbanan. So who is it? Elapshita Rabbi Yossi. The author of this price is Rabbi Yossi. If you're going to hold that Rabbi Yossi holds that when you have one animal and you could extend from the right leg to the left leg, therefore, in your mind, if you have a half a zayas from loaf A and a half a zayas from loaf B, I could combine them. Ella, but if you're going to be like Rab Huna, we go to Amud Aleph. Like Rav Huna said, Trey Gufininu, that by the two legs you consider it as two distinct different parts, and it doesn't spread. Then how does a half a zayis with loaf A and a half a zayis with loaf B spread? And how could Rabbi Yossi hold that it's mitzaref? So the Gemara first wants to say, how many? Who is the Brisa going according to Rebbe? The Brisa is Rebbe, and it's talking about a told if we read the Brisa wrong. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Rebbe Imani says that kosher. That we read the Brisa wrong. It's not dealing with the machlekes between Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim. The Brisa is dealing with a totally different thing. What's the Brisa dealing with? That he had in mind when he shechted when he shechted one animal, that he's mefagil half a zayas of loaf A. He wasn't thinking about combining them. And then when he shechted the second animal, he's mefagil half a zayas of loaf B. So it's like, and therefore it's not pigel because each sheep is just a half a matir. You can't be mefagil something unless you think the same thought by both sheep 1 and sheep number 2. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi and Rebbe. And therefore, it's dealing with something, a totally different topic, where you mafagel each one separately, a half a zayis. So that's what he says. Sheikhid is a kevis. He shechted kevis number 1, lecha chatz zayis mechalazu, to eat a half a zayis from one bread. V'chein chavera lecha chatz zayis mechalazu. Rebbe Oimani says that kosher. That's kosher. So let's think about it. Let's analyze, because he said half and half, and he was shechting sheep number 1 for a half a kazayas of loaf A, and sheep number 2 for a half a zayas of loaf B. But let's say he said a kazayas from both. In his mind, he shechted both sheeps, and he said a kazayas combined from both. So then Rebbe would hold mitzaref. So then we're back to square one. Rebbe aliba deman. Who could Rebbe hold like? Either aliba derbanan, afil ba'achas mehen nami. Even if you didn't combine them both, Rabbanan will hold that just thinking about loaf A, a kazayas, will automatically make loaf B pigel. It must be that Rebbe holds like Rebbe. You have this question. So the question would be, again, if the Brisa went according to Rabbi Yossi, then it doesn't make sense, because Rabbi Yossi cannot hold, like Rav Huna said, that if you have a bad thought on leg number 1, it could extend to leg number 2. So the Gemara wants to say, La'olam, the Gemara wants to try to say, maybe save it. La'olam alibi the Rabbanim. Maybe this price is going according to the Rabbanim. That according to this is what the Bryce is saying, that really it's not pigel. If you don't have a kazayas, right? It says achi fagel bishneim. Bishneim means on both sheeps. That's what it means. Instead of shteihem, you say bishnehem, by both sheeps, and you have a kazayas. And the Brisa is teaching you something different. What is the Brisa teaching you? That you really have to. The Brisa is going to Rabbanan, and the Brisa is telling you that it's not enough to have a pigel thought when you're shechting sheep number 1. You have to have a pigel thought shechting both sheep, but albeit you could have the pigel thought can be directed to one loaf, and it's automatically going to extend to the other loaf, because there is an opinion that says that even if I have a pigel thought on a half a matir on just one sheep, il mefagel lofe, and we're trying to exclude ourselves from that opinion. So the Gemara continues, and he says, this will exclude what Rameir said. Rameir holds that you could do pigel just on one sheep, and one sheep alone, a bad thought on one sheep alone, with one bread, mefagel the whole thing. Kamash Malam, that this is the opinion, the light, that the Rabbanan disagree with that. You have to have a bad thought when you're shechting both sheeps, but the thought could be on just one bread, not both breads. So the Bryce is going according to Rabbanan. So the Gemara says that you can't say the Bryce is going to Rabbanan. If you're going to say that, my la'olam, what does it mean la'olam? La'olam means that this is totally wrong. If you're trying to say that the Bryce goes according to Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi is trying to say that you have to have a pigel thought shechting both sheeps, and you have to have the pigel thought combining a half a zayas of the first bread with the second bread. And then we were saying it's la'oila means you have to really be do extra work in order to make something pigel. Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold like Rameir, who says even a half a matir can make a pigel. Just one sheep can make a pigel. And he doesn't agree with the Rabbanan who say just one bread can make pigel. That's why he says la'olam, that the Bryce is like Rabbi Yossi. Eli Amrit Rabbanan, but if you want to say the Rabbanan that it goes according to Rabbanan, and all you have to do is have a mind by both sheeps, but you could have the mind just one bread. My la'olam, what does la'olam mean? La'olam means you have to make it spread on both sheeps and both breads. And according to Rabbanan, it doesn't have to spread on both breads. So the bottom line, what the Gemara, okay, here we review. Rav Huna said, the statement was that, like we said in the pictures, that if you have a pigel thought according to Rabbi Yossi by right leg extends to the left leg. But we're trying to prove that the brisa, if it goes according to Rabbi Yossi, and it has to go according to Rabbi Yossi, this brisa must hold that the breads, that because Rabbi Yossi holds you combine a half a thought by loaf, a half a kazayas of loaf A and a half a kazayas of loaf B, in your mind, if you could combine it to one thought, and there's two separate, distinct things, certainly Rabbi Yossi will hold that you can, when you make pigel on one leg, it extends to the other leg. So that's one question against Rabbi Huna. The Rabashi says there's a brisa that says Rabbi Yossi, I'm a Mishum Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said the following. There are certain kabbanas that are, as you know from many, many times, certain kabbanas are brought totally on the outside, and some you have to sprinkle the blood on the inside of the sanctuary, the inside of the building over here. So now, the Brisa says, Rabbi Yossi said, pigel b'dav anasa b'chutz, pigel. B'dav anasa b'fin, loy pigel. Ketzad. Brisa gives you cases where you're going to make pigel, and Brisa and cases where there is no pigel. You're standing in the Azara outside the big sanctuary. You're saying, I'm shechting this parhel and tzibur, okay, that you're supposed to sprinkle on the proiches in the sanctuary. So where are you standing? In the temple courtyard. And the thought is about something you're going to do in the building. Loy pigel, that's not a pigel, because you have an outside thought and something that's done on the inside. If you're standing on the inside, let's say in the sanctuary, and you're sprinkling on the proiches, and you say, I'm going to sprinkle this blood in order to makriv the emerim, which belong of the param shtiba belong on the outside mizbeach tomorrow, or spill the rest of the blood tomorrow. So it's a pigel thought, but you're standing in the building. Like pigel, that's not pigel. You have a pigel thought inside the sanctuary, but something that you're going to do outside the building. But if you're standing on the outside courtyard, the Aman, he said, I'm shechting, pigel. You didn't make pigel. So you're standing in the outside courtyard, right? You're standing out here, you're shechting, and what is your thought? My thought is that you see this on this picture. I'm going to go there. The kohen is going to go there and spill this, the shirayim of the blood, out on the tomorrow. So he has a pigel thought regarding the avodah of spilling the extra blood down the drain on the mizbeach. So that is called pigel. So now so the question is, so now the korban is pigel. What is pigel? The blood. The shirayim is made something pigel. A bad thought about the blood makes something pigel. That means the blood becomes pigel. That means if you eat the blood, you get two averos. One, because it's eating blood, and two, because it's pigel. The truth is, can blood become pigel? But now we learned in the Mishnah, no matter what bad thought you're going to have about the blood never becomes pigel. And we're going to see the reason by that when we get up to it. Well, we saw the reason for that. But anyway, the blood can never become pigel. Elapshita, la pugale basa, you're making the meat. So let's see what this guy did. This guy had a pigel thought about the blood. And what's going to become pigel? What's going to become pigel? The meat. So two distinct things. So Rabbi Yossi says the blood thought can make the meat, and the meat and blood are separate items. So madach, that works. Kolshkein, certainly you have a pigel thought on your right leg, it will spread to the left leg. That's the Gemara's question. You didn't think about the meat. Rabbi Yossi mepagel, it becomes pigel. Certainly it becomes pigel. The pigel b'yarech min, pigel b'yarech small. Because if you made a pigel on the right leg, certainly the left leg. If you have a pigel thought on the blood, the meat becomes pigel. So then Rabbi Yossi does hold certain, you could extend it. So therefore, certainly Rabbi Yossi should hold if you have a pigel thought on the right leg, it should extend to the left leg. But and furthermore question, Amar Ravina Tashma, a guy made the kamitza and he had in mind to eat the shirayim, or he's going to be makdir the koimitz tomorrow. So what did he do? He made the kamitza. Let's say making the kamitza. And what's he thinking when he's making the kamitza? He's making the kamitza. I'm sorry, right here's the kamitza. He's making the kamitza on the condition that he's going to be makdir the koimitz tomorrow. So what does the Brisa say? Then Rabbi Yossi says that it's pigel. What is pigel? What is pigel? How could the koimitz be pigel? Even if what you did was you burned some of the koimitz, right? You took the koimitz and you brought it onto the mizbeach. Some of it became burned, right? So, and then you pulled it away from the mizbeach. Still, you would not get kares because the Tanan, there's certain things that can never become pigel, and one of them is koimitz. The koimitz can never become pigel. Elapshita. So what is you making pigel? You have a mind by the pigel, a pigel thought by this little kamitza, and what's becoming Rabbi Yossi saying the rest of the item, the rest of the shirayim are going to become pigel. So you see, you're not thinking about the shirayim, the leftovers, but the pigel thought on the kaimitz mipalge could be we go to Mebez. It could be mipalgel the rest of shirayim. So over here, by the left leg and the right leg, certainly it should spread. It's one body. It's by the shechting, and you had a pigel thought on the right leg. Certainly it should continue over to the left leg. So the Gemara concludes, Ela Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hainu time in the Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi holds Hakosev Asan Guf Echad. Hakosev Asan Shnei Gufim. Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan, disagrees with Rav Hura, and he holds Rabbi Yossi will hold that. Rabbi Yossi will hold basically, like we said before, that if you have a mind by the right leg, it will spread to the left leg. So it's one unit, and yet Rabbi Yossi holds that if you have a mind, a pigel in loaf A, it will not spread to loaf B. Why? And only if you combine them, if you're in your mind. Half a zayis here and a half a zayis by loaf B. So how does Rabbi Yossi come up with that opinion? So the answer is, because it's a Xeris HaKosev. HaKosev Asim Guf Echad. HaKosev Asor Shtei Gufim. Sometimes the lechem aponim is viewed as one entity, the two breads, because you need both breads. And sometimes they're viewed as two entities because you have to bake them separately. Guf echad ba'akve adadi. Shnei gufem, the ama rachmana halachude avida halachude avida. So the Torah told you bake them separately. So what? So when does your pigel thought matter? Arvinu, if in your mind you mix them up, that means you combine the half a zayis of loaf A and a half a zayis of loaf B as a pigel thought. Bisarvin, they become mitz, that kosam asum gufechad. The Torah considers them one. So therefore, even just a half a zayis in loaf A and a half a zayis in loaf B could combine. Palgilu, but if you just have a kazayis in loaf A, mipalgi, that it's divided, the kosam asum shnei gufim, because the pasuk put them as two distinct entities. So Rabbi Yossi is that a unique opinion is that if you just think about a kazayas and a loaf B is not pigel, but if you have a half a zayas of loaf A and a half a zayas of loaf B, so in your mind you're trying to combine them. The Torah says that's good, and you could combine them even though you're just having a half a zayas of loaf A and a half a zayas of loaf B. They'll combine as one pigel thought, and both loaf A and loaf B will become pigel, even according to Rabbi Yossi. Now the Gemara asked one final question, and then we'll stop. The question is, the Gemara says, till now we're dealing with two different carbonos, and you have two different matirs, a half a matir and a half a matir, and two different breads. What if happens if you have one carbon, one animal, but a bunch of different breads? Where do you have one carbon with a bunch of different breads? What would Rabbi Yossi hold like that? By Rabbi Yochanan, pilgil lachmei toida. You bring a carbon toida. Carbon toida has four different breads, right? So if you make a pigel in one of the breads, according to Rabbi Yossi, let's say you're shechting the carbon toida, and you're mafagel, you're thinking just about one of the breads. Do all three other breads become pigel? Mahu. Would Rabbi Yossi hold they all extend to that? By minchas mafa, or same thing by minchas mafa, you have two different types of breads by matzahs by there. If you do the kamitza, it has rakiki and the matzahs. So will the pigel spread? Here you're not dealing with two different animals. Maybe over here the reason why Rabbi Yossi says it doesn't spread. If you just think about loaf A alone, a kazayas of loaf A, it's not going to spread to loaf B because they're two distinct animals with two distinct breads. But if you had one animal in a type of carbon that has one animal and a couple of breads, so then even Rabbi Yossi will hold it'll extend. Or at the end of the day, by lachmi toida and by malfatana, each bread is a different unique bread. They're baked differently. So the Gemara says, so it seems that the Rabbi Yossi will hold that it doesn't spread, or maybe it doesn't spread. No, that you separate it. That hachinami palag, that they do separate. That just if you have one bread, if you have a mind when you shechting toida, just one bread, one unique groups of bread, it will not extend to the other breads. Okay, we will stop right over here. So just continue to the Mishnah, and then we'll stop. Tarabara b'shaz shchita chishav lechal chatzizayis, b'shaz rika chishav lechal chatzizayis. So shchita, if you're shechting and you have a pigel thought of a half a zayis, so that's not enough. But then you combine it with a zrika, and you had a pigel thought for the other half a zayis. Pigel, that's pigel, but the shchita was zrika mitzdarf. Raisa says shchita and zrika could be mitzdarf because those things, shchita and zrika, are matirin, which means that the shchita allows you to sprinkle the blood and it makes the blood holy, and the zrika allows you to eat the carbon. But others say shchita zrika to tavaya matirin and kabbalah v'alocha loy. But it wouldn't work by kabbalah v'alocha. Half a zayis by kabbalah and half a zayis by halacha will not make the carbon pigel. It does make the carbon pigel. Hanach the merchakim, these things that have distance from each other make the carbon pigel. The kol shkein hani de mekarvin, certainly kabbalah and halacha will make the carbon pigel. If you have a half a zayis by the kabbalah and half a zayis by the halacha, it would make the carbon pigel. Says the Gemara, Eini, it's not true. Watani Levi, Abal Voidis, Einu Stafil Pigel. If you have a half a thought by the Shchita and a half a thought by the Zrika, according to Levi, it's not combined for Pigel. Shchita, Vizrika, Kabbalah, any half a Zayas by any one of these do not combine with each other. And says the Gemara, Amar Elva, Rabbi says, Leikasha, Rebbe, Rabbanim. Levi was in accordance with Rebbe. That's what Levi's an Amoira, I guess. But Rava says Levi is what is the opinion of Rebbe. So now the Gemara says, the Gemara originally thinks this way, but eventually the Gemara says, no, Rebbe can't be Levi. He's just disagreeing with this whole thing. The Tanya we learned in a Brisa, which we saw this before, that he shechted one of the sheep to eat a half a zayas of one of the animals. So he shechted this one to eat a half a zayas of A. Then he shechted sheep number B, number 2, I think, and to eat a half a zayas of loaf B. So the Rebbe says that's kosher. They don't combine. Rebbe Aimer Zek kosher. So Rebbe is of the opinion you don't combine half zayases. So the Gemara thought that Levi aligned himself with Rebbe. Abaya said, Ema deshamat leila Rebbe chatzi amata v'chatzi achila. The Gemara is slugging this up and says maybe Rebbe here it's a half a mater and a half achila. You have a half a mater, as we explained, that each sheep is a half a mater and each loaf is a half a zayas. Only then it doesn't combine. But kulay mater, if you have the whole mater of, let's say, of you're doing the whole avoid of shchita with a half a zayas, or the whole avoid of zrika with a half a zayas, mishamat late, would Rebbe hold that it doesn't combine? So Abaya wanted to slug up that Rebbe does not go like Levi. But the Gemara is going to refute Abaya, and the Gemara is going to say in the conclusion that Abaya, no, Levi must go like Levi must go like Rebbe. Why? Amalei Rava Bar Chanel Abaya v'yislei l'Rebbe kuli mat v'chatzi achila. If you want to tell me that no, Rebbe holds kuli mat v'chatzi achila would be a good combination for pigel, so then ligza chatzi mate v'chatzi achila atu kuli mate v'chatzi achila. Let him be goiza even a half a mate and a chatzi achila, maybe kuli mate v'kuli chatzi achila. So he should be goiza. He shouldn't say oimani it's kosher, which is a chatzi mate and a chatzi achila. And how do you know Rabbi Yossi likes to goiza things? The Rabbi Yossi goiza, Rabbanon goiza. Sometimes things are not pigel, but Rabbi Yossi is going to say it's possible. Some things are not pigel according to Rabbanon, and Rabbanon say it's at least possible. Rabbi Yossi Gaza, the Tanan lahakti levei nosa. If you're doing the kaimits and you have a mind to be maktir the levaina tomorrow, just the levaina, but it's not the whole thing, and it's from one. It's you're holding the kaimits and you're thinking about the levaina. Rabbi Yossi have a possible vein mekars v'chachamam pigel vein b'chayam cars. So Rabbi Yossi says it's possible, but it's not kares. Because you're not holding the levina, you're holding the flour. Rabbanon nami gazer, and Rabbanon also like to make gezeres. Tnan pigel b'kaimitz v'loy b'levina, b'levina v'loy b'kaimitz. If you do each one of them, Reb Meir oimer pigel b'chayav kares. V'chachamim oimer ein by kares is shvagel b'chol amater. Chachamim say it's not kares, but it's possible because if you're just thinking about the kaimitz and not the levina, or levina not the kaimitz, so it's a chatzi amater, it's still possible. So what is the reward? We're holding that it must be that if Rabbi Yossi indeed held that kulay mater, like the zrika and the shchita and the half achila would combine for pigel, then if that's the case, then the chatzi mater and the chatzi achila, he should not say it's kosher. He should say we should make a gezerah chatzi mater chatzi achila auto kuli mater v'chatzi achila. So it must be that Rebbe holds that kuli mater v'chatzi achila does not combine, and therefore Rebbe is Levi. So the Gemara says no, Rebbe is not Levi. Amalei hachi hashta. How can you compare that? Bishlam hasam goes a Rebbe kaimis to levina ate kaimis to mincha. If you're going to the kaimitz or levina are the kaimitz the mincha. There was a reason. If you're going to allow therefore he said that if you're that the kaimitz of levina should be puzzled, because maybe you can have kavana on the kamitz on the flour itself, and therefore that would be pigel. So that's why we're going to the kaimitz levina to be puzzled. Maybe kaimitz the mincha. Rabban and Gazri kaimitz after kaimitz, or we want to make gezeres from one kaimitz to another kaimitz. The minchas chayte that doesn't have levina. Ulevina after levina abba b'zichim. Kvasim name kaves ate kaves chaver. Bazach ate bazach chaver. So there's reasons why in those situations Rabbanim made gezeres, and there's reasons why in those situations Rabbi Yossi made gezeres. It's just it works that way. Elahacha. There's no reason that they should make a gezerah, and therefore, if there's no reason, it could stand very well that Rebbe will hold kuli mate v'chatzei chila would be pigel, like not like Levi, but yet you could be not be goizer chatzi mate v'chatzei chila. Because the only time you make a gezerah, if there's another chatzi mate v'chatzei achila that's pigel, so then you'll say that this chatzi mate and chatzi achila will be possible. But if there's no other chatzi mate and chatzi achila that's pigel, there's no reason to make a gezerah that this one should be possible. So and hachinami mistabed the time the rabbanim mishum hachihu. Tani Sefer Brisa says boidim chacham l'racham meya the michas chaydim is kanois. If you have a pigel thought, she pigel b'kaimet, she pigel b'chiyam l'kars. Shekaimet hu amater. Why does he have to tell me that? There's no levina by a minchas chayta. There's no levina oil, no levina by minchas kanois. And so it's obviously it's pshita mi'ikamata achrina. If you have a pigel thought on that matir, it should make the whole thing pigel. And love hokamash. That's the reason. The Rabbanan telling you the reason that the time of the kaimitz, the reason why they answer just the kaimitz without the levina, and say it's possible. Sometimes you only have a kaimitz, because sometimes you only have a kaimitz and you have a reason to make the gezerah. Bottom line is, what we just concluded this Gemara is that Levi really doesn't have a tana to hang his hat on. If you want to say he goes like Rebbe, no, Rebbe could hold that in this case, shchita, if you thought a half of zayis, and zrika, you thought a half of zayis, they are mitzvah because it's a kulay mater and a chatzei achila. It's a complete avoida, shchita, a complete avoida of zrika. And you're just having a chatzei achila, they could combine. Rebbe only says that chatzei mater and chatzei zayis, that chatzei achila, chatzei mater and chatzei achila, of course, that is kosher. Oh, so if you have nobody to say like Levi, really, maybe I guess it stands that you could combine. If you shashchita, you thought a half a zayis, and shazrika, and you thought another half a zayis, it's pigol. Okay, we just ended Daf Yud Dalet.